Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Deliver It. This is your Agile Product Owners Podcast. My name is Corey Bryan. Today, we're going to be doing a solo show, which is cool because I've survived Thanksgiving. I've survived family. I've survived shopping. I didn't do any shopping, so that's how I survived it. I chose not to participate, and that's pretty cool. And if you're in the U.S., I hope you survived Thanksgiving. If you're not in the U.S., you survived another Thursday, so congratulations to that. We're going to have a very good topic today. I did have some readings over the time that I've been on vacation, and I want to talk a little bit about them. So the first one is by Jeremy Jarrell. He did an article on LinkedIn called Evil User Stories, basically where he talks about, let's have a user story. Traditional user stories are about, the user wants to do this, or we want to be able to allow the customer or the user to do a certain thing. His idea is let's have a story that takes the opposite side. So let's have a user story where the user is an evil person or a bad actor, and they're going to want to do something to our product, and we don't want to let them do that. So how can we create a story to have something like a hacker or an ex-employee or somebody to make sure that they're not able to do something bad to our product or our company? Very interesting idea. Usually when you think of things that you don't want to have happen, they're part of a non-functional requirement or they're part of an acceptance criteria that you say, should not be able to cancel something or should not be able to enter a wrong password, something like that. But this is a very interesting take to say we specifically don't want to have somebody do something. It's a very good concept for user stories. I made the suggestion that he could put these on black index cards, which I think would be cool. Get some silver pens and have some evil user stories. Very good way to look at the board and tell what you're doing. So that's a good article. We'll put a link to that in our show notes. Another one was by Derek Sievers. He had an article talking about, he has two responses to something. It's either no or it's hell yeah. The idea being, if you're having trouble prioritizing something, if you're having trouble saying yes to everything or no to some things, then this is a way that you can actually look at different things, both your product and for other things to say, this is something we really need to do now, or this is something we don't need to do. So it's a way to kind of categorize those two things. He actually did an exercise where he talks about going through and listing all the things that he's doing or all the features that he's being asked to do and putting them in 1 through 10. And if it's not a 9 or a 10, so if he has things that are like 4 or 6, he puts them down to 1 because they're no's. They're not high enough. They're not, hell yeah, we should be doing this. Don't do it. So I like that idea. I've had to do that sometimes too. It's a real hard prioritization effort. You can use it for things like, yeah, we really need to do this to the product now, or no, we don't. So that's a good idea too. And the last one I'll recommend is by Elizabeth Hendrickson. She had an article called I Prefer This Over That. It was a tweet that she sent out, and a lot of people had a good reaction to it, so she expanded it on a little bit, similar to the Agile Manifesto and how they have things like collaboration over contract negotiation. So things like that. The 4 things that she put in here is she likes to be able to recover better than she likes to have something perfect. I really like that as well because being able to do something and undo it quickly is better than trying to get the best thing. I really like that approach. She likes predictability over commitment. So there again, with teams, we're trying to get them to commit to something in a sprint or in a release, and being able to predict based on your velocities or other measures I think is more valuable than a commitment. I want the commitment from the team. Don't get me wrong, but I'd like to be able to say this team does X number of stories or X number of points or X number of whatever every sprint. And with that, I can plan out my month or my release that I've got. So I like that one too. Predictability over commitment. Safety nets over change control. Oh boy, change control. So again, with safety nets, it's the idea of we catch ourselves when something happens and we don't have to have, 3 people that approve something, before it can get in. We're able to catch it ourselves and we're able to undo something pretty quick. Again, that's a recovery type thing. And collaboration over handoffs. Again, since we're working with teams, we're working with cross-functional teams, we don't want there to be handoffs, or as many handoffs as we can eliminate. We want to do that. A good opposite idea of that is when you're trying to release software. So how many hands does it have to go through before you can actually release something? How many handoffs does it have to do? What if you collaborated instead with your DevOps team or your designers or your whoever else you've got, so that you don't have to hand over something? So I like that as well. Collaboration over handoffs. So 3 good articles I think that will be good for you to read as you start to look at some interesting things out there for the product owner. So today's topic, we're going to talk about managing stakeholders. And this is an important topic because as a product owner, one of the big chunks of time that we're going to be spending is with our stakeholders or with our users. And we'll define that a little bit better before we get into it. But so this is anybody that is not working on the team, basically. And we're going to talk about how to go through that. And there's a difference between agile stakeholders or stakeholders in general and clients. I want to make sure clients and customers and stakeholders are usually not the same things. Clients and customers we'll talk about later, and I'll use some of those terms interchangeably. But most of what we're talking about here is stakeholders. So people that are in your organization or people that have a vested interest in your organization's producing of this product that you're the owner of. Some goals for doing this. So why are we wanting to manage our stakeholders? We want better outcomes. We want amazing outcomes, which is a really good a term I picked up from the last Lisa Crispin book I read, was the amazing outcomes. So that's what the goal is. We want to have those types of amazing outcomes that make everything better. We need to engage our stakeholders because we want to change. We want to change something. We want to change the culture. We want to change the process. We want to change the products. We want to change something, and we need their support to do that. So to do that, we have to identify our stakeholders. When you identify stakeholders, they're not all equal. So not everybody is a valuable voice to listen to as far as stakeholders go. Roman Pitchler's got a great article, and I've seen it a couple times, but he was the latest one I've seen, of trying to divide stakeholders into 4 quadrants so that you can kind of figure out where the ones are. So it's based on interest and power, and it's based on who you need to work with, who you don't need to work with, and who you kind of need to keep on the side. We'll go over it really quickly, but it's a very good article, and I would recommend that. So people who are you should involve are the subjects. So people with a very high interest and low power. Those are people who are subjects. I'm thinking that's people like in sales or marketing. People who are high interest and high power are your players. Those are people you really need to collaborate with. And that's what we'll talk about for the bulk of this show, is those collaborators. People with low interest and low power is basically the crowd. So you need to keep them informed somehow. And then low interest and high power are your context setters. So those are people you consult with. We'll talk a little bit about those this show, but mainly I'm interested in the players, the people that hold the money, the people that make or break your product, the people that need to make the decisions with you as the key stakeholders that we're going to talk about, and the ones that we need to get on board. So we're going to talk about that for the majority of the show. So once you identify your stakeholders, once you know who we're talking to, once you know who the key people are, the players are, then we need to start, I think, first setting expectations. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk to them in business terms. We're not going to talk to them about Agile. We're not going to train them on Agile unless it's part of what we're doing. If we're changing our culture, then great. Let's talk to you about the actual Agile things. But the majority of people that I've dealt with, it's been, let's just talk about the benefits. So we're going to set our expectations, but we're not going to train them. So when we set our expectations, we want to set up small incremental deliveries. So we're going to talk to them about how often we're going to release. We're going to talk to them about the size of the software that we're going to release. It's going to be small. It's going to be a part of what you asked for. It's going to be every so often. So you're going to see things every so often, and it's going to actually work. So that's going to be really good and really a change from what they've had. We're going to have lots of those small changes. So we're going to need to make small changes. We're going to actually deliver small changes, but it's going to be a lot of those small things, and it's going to be very frequent. We can change. Change is welcome. We want to change based on what's right for the product. And we also want to change at the right time. So we're going to change at various times. It's just not going to be an everyday change. And when they get the software, those small pieces that we're going to deliver, they're actually going to be able to use it. It's going to be fully tested. It's going to be working software, and they can use it in an environment, and they can show it off. They can do whatever they want to with it. One of the great things that I've done, and I may have talked about this before, was talk about getting done with clients, with stakeholders. So when we talk about done, we're talking about done. So we're all done with our testing. We're all done with our code. We're all done with our documentation. So we don't need to do anything else. I had a great experience one time with a client when we were getting them prepared for this with a stakeholder, when we were getting them prepared for this, and they really latched onto that done criteria. They repeated it back to me a couple times. I talked about that. That was a great experience because he got it. Other people started to get it as he was transitioning to that. So that mentality shift, that expectation, was starting to change. And this does take a while. So I've had several stakeholders and clients that I've worked with before that it took 3-4 times that these small incremental deliveries and these small bits of working software that we delivered before they actually started to see and started to change their minds. So they weren't used to an agile concept. They were used to very waterfall concepts. They were used to that 100% mentality. But we were able to start with good teams and good delivery to change their attitude and change their mind. When you do it the first time, it's kind of, they tend to dismiss it. When you do it a second time, they start to pay a little bit of attention, but you've done it twice. Big deal. When you start to do it a third time, it starts to sink in. It's repetitive. It gets to that point of, oh, you guys are actually doing this, and it's not a one-time thing. When you get into those repeated things, that's when they really start to change their mindset, and that's when you can really start to be better as an agile shop or as an agile team. Another thing to talk about when you're doing expectation setting, I think, is talk about experiments. Talk about the ways that you're going to change how you do and learn. And that's the key point with the experiments is how are you going to learn about certain things? Learn about technologies, learn about markets, learn about customers, learn about ideas. How can you do that? You run experiments. So that's what we're going to talk a lot about with stakeholders because that's a word they can kind of understand. Now, we're going to make those expectations because that's part of the key. We set them up, we deliver on them, and we've established that trust that we need to with our stakeholders. If we don't do that, then we need to talk about why that was true. So the other thing we're going to talk about with expectations is when to adjust them. So we know we're going to adjust sometime the scope. So that's okay. We're going to adjust what we're going to be working on. What's first? That's okay. What we're not going to adjust is the quality that we're going to expect from the product. We really want a high quality product. We really want to do all the things technically sound that we need to do. And that's why scope is really what's adjustable with your stakeholders. The other thing that's adjustable with your stakeholders is when to actually release the software. Releasing software really is a business decision. We can have all the technical pieces ready, but there could be something that we don't understand that the stakeholders do or the business does that they say this is either not the right time to release or we need to release now. One of the nice things about having a good quality product at the end of every sprint is you should be able to release that when it's ready. So we may have more features that we're doing in the next couple sprints, but what we have is good enough and we should be able to release that. So it's up to really the business and your stakeholders to work with you as a product owner to decide when could we actually release this. I worked on the large project I worked on. We were delivering on a feature basis. We were delivering between every 6 to 9 weeks. And at about a year into that, we had built enough infrastructure, we had enough users that they wanted to change to a monthly release. They wanted to release features more often and items more often. So that was fine. We changed and adjusted our our processes and our scope so that we actually could release every month. And we had a preset delivery day, and whatever was done by that date, that's what went out. And that was a good thing. I really like that model. And one of the other things to talk about adjusting, again, we're talking about prioritization, is what's the most important thing that we could be doing right now? And that's going to change. We could have a market change. We could have a user change. We could have all types of things that cause us to reflect and look back on what we decided 2 weeks ago and decide that that really doesn't make sense. We need to change something and do that for the next release. And that's okay. I think it's also important to let the stakeholders know that their involvement in this project and this product will be much, much more. We're going to have more frequent interactions with you. We're going to have more frequent questions. We're going to have more frequent things that we need you to tell us about. And we need you to make decisions on those things, or help us make decisions as a product owner. Help us decide what the most important thing is. Or if we've got a question about, do we like option A or option B? How can we go about deciding that? So they're going to need to make lots of little decisions instead of big upfront decisions, and then they go away for 6 months. So this is going to be a lot more collaborative sense that we have with our stakeholders. And we need for them to know what they don't know. So they're going to have to learn some things, learning about their business, learning about their users that they typically don't do or they haven't done before. Usually it's the user said, build this. I told you to build this. You go build it and let me know when you're done. Now we're asking them to say, what do they really want from this? What types of things do they want to do? Let's go in and ask some questions. Let's learn what they actually want. And let's decide, again, going back to the experiment, what makes the most sense to do. So I mentioned it before, but again, on the training side, we're not there to teach them Agile or train them on Agile, unless we are. I made the mistake a couple times of going in and start saying, here's Agile and here's why you do Agile. The business and the stakeholders that I was dealing with, they really didn't understand, get it, or want to get it. They wanted their outcomes. They wanted faster delivery. They wanted all the things, the benefits of Agile. They just didn't want Agile to be pushed on them. So that was a learning lesson for me, and something I've used as I've gone forward, is to actually don't go in there pushing Agile methods or Agile keywords or anything like that. Go in and talk about the benefits. We're going to get better feedback. We're going to have working software. We're going to be quicker to market. We're going to have transparency across the organization, across our development life cycle, and what's most important and what the team's finished. And we're going to have a very high quality setting. So a lot of people talk about quality. A lot of people talk about testing and everything else. We're actually going to do it. And those are the benefits that we're going to get from this effort that we're going to have. A couple times when I was doing this, I didn't talk about Agile. I just talked about the benefits, and we were able to go through when somebody said, hey, how did you do that? That's when you go, well, here's this methodology. Here's this type of thing that we can do. It's called Agile, and here's the particulars about it. Again, we're actually going to do those things, but that's not what we're pushing or what we're selling. And I think that's very successful when we can do that with our stakeholders and get them to understand why we're doing something and what they're going to get out of it. And I think that's key for stakeholders who aren't traditional Agilists or working in Agile environments, is to get them to the point where they can understand that. If they do understand that, if they've worked in this model before, or they've understand the benefits and everything else, then talk to them about some of the details if they ask. Don't be afraid to have that discussion, but have it if they ask the question. I think there's some ideas for what you don't want to do with your stakeholders. So we don't want to push too hard. We do want to have a baseline for what we what we're setting up, our expectations, and what we set up as, here's the way we're going to be doing this process. Again, talk about the benefits. Don't talk about, the Agile details, but do have that baseline. We're going to have, an established cadence. We're going to have working software. We're going to ask for your feedback. We're going to show it to you, and we're going to ask you if that's right or not. And we're going to allow those changes, but don't push too hard on, again, the Agile stuff. I never like settling. I never like being told this is what you need to do. I do like to have alternatives for whatever they're coming at me with. So if they say we need to do it this way, then I like to come back with, hey, here's an idea that we've been thinking about, or here's something that we did a little bit of research on, and here's some options that we can have. Always have options. So one idea is not the best idea. That idea may lead to something better. It's up to you as a product owner to be thinking about that, and to have some ideas to come back with them. If it's the first time they've thrown something at you, then just like an estimate, the right answer is let me check with the team, or let me think about that and get back with you. So never agree or settle on one thing that comes from the stakeholders. There has to be a better way. It's your job to help find that better way for them. And then don't give up. So this is a very hard with stakeholders that want to beat you up, or stakeholders that want to tell you what to do or how to do something, or that you're not doing the right thing, in the right order. Keep at it. You're going to get through to them at some point. Keep fighting, keep teaching, keep preaching the benefits, and keep your teams delivering. You've got to go through that, 6 to 8 weeks of constant questions, constant phone calls going, I don't understand. How come we can't have our 6-month plan? Or how come we can't do like we've been doing? It takes some time. It takes you as a product owner with your coach and your team to be the delivery mechanism that you're going to want to see, and to actually prove that is a better mechanism for them. So don't give up. Don't let it go, a month, 2 months. It's okay. Keep fighting. Keep doing the right thing. And then when you have those successes, don't let them slide. When you have those successes with your stakeholders, when you have the ideas and the reactions from them and the delivery, pieces with them, make sure you reiterate it. Make sure you actually get out there and show them that this is the reason we're doing this. We've changed these things, and this is the result we have. Isn't that a good result? Or you like that result? Here's why we did that. So I think making sure that you point out even the small victories, and these, again, we're doing small pieces. We're going to have small victories. Make sure those small victories are shared with the team and with the stakeholders, and make sure you reinforce those small victories with the stakeholders. So again, they start to get it. So again, stakeholders, the really player people, the people who hold the money, the people who are interested in your product, or who have requested this product, or who see the need to this product. You need to work with them on the visions. You need to work with them on goals, and you need to work with them on the benefits and features that you're going to actually create as a product owner. And I think that's a really close relationship. I think it should be a close relationship no matter where they're located. You need to get in touch with these stakeholders and get them involved, and really collaborate with them on the product and where it's going. So we will have a link to Roman's article, which I mentioned was very good. There's also a really good list of things for stakeholders over at Agile Modeling. We'll have a link to that, stakeholder participation. It's a very good article as well. And if you're having questions or having issues with your stakeholders, very good resources to actually go through and try to figure out how you can get better stakeholder relationships. So there you go. If you have any feedback or any questions about product ownership, you can let me know on Twitter at DeliveritCast, or you can email us at deliveritcast@gmail.com. Again, if you want to share the show around, drop us a rating on iTunes, that'd be great. And co-host submissions are available as well. Some questions we had from the intranets. We found a question from Jeff. He said, user stories for very small changes. Assuming a story cannot be broken down at all, how do you handle stories for really small changes? Updating the copy or a few words on a page as an example, do you expect the story to be updated using the as a blank type format? Or do you need to keep things simple and say, update this button text from OK to go? So, story format for small changes. Okay. If it's a small changes such as update this button from OK to go, yeah, I would write that as a sticky, not as a story per se, but as a sticky. If it's something that the team feels like they can estimate, then go ahead and estimate it. If it's a 0, then that's fine. If you want to gather up a lot of those little changes, one of the things I've done is taking a lot of those little feedback changes, put them into one story, made those individual pieces of acceptance criteria, and then that's what gets estimated and actually worked on. So you don't have to do that. I definitely wouldn't put something like that in the story format unless it was a very important thing. So do you have to? No, you don't have to follow the story format. but you do have to get the work done. And anything that is work and anything that needs to be done is a story or a sticky, and it does go on the board and the team knows about it. If the team needs to estimate it, then let them estimate. If not, then, they get to estimate it as a 0 or a 1/2, which is fine because those things are okay. But again, you could group them up, and as a product owner, you could actually look at and say, when we get 4 of these things, we'll put them in a story and that story will be on the board. Okay. That's fine too. But yeah. And then Ryan asks us about how do you most effectively stay a couple sprints ahead with ready stories? So he's acting as a product owner role, which is new to him. He's having trouble staying ahead of the team by having stories ready to go in the backlog. Each sprint, he's scrambling to ensure that he has enough stories in a ready state for the planning meeting, working a ton of hours, a few days before the sprint. So far, he's been able to just barely keep up, having just enough stories to fill one sprint with a couple and a couple ready to be pulled in from the backlog if needed. So is this normal that all POs face, or what are some strategies? So he's got a lot of different ideas about why that's happening. I think one of the things that you really need to do is work on, before you get ready for 2 sprints in advance, get ready for 1 sprint in advance. So work on the stories that you have, keep working on them, keep breaking them down, keep doing your grooming sessions or your story discovery sessions with your team and your stakeholders, and make sure you understand that these are the things that we need to work on. These are the most highest priority things that we need to work on, and we're going to go forward from there. If things change, then you've got a list of stories to work through. If things change dramatically, then maybe you say, look, for the next sprint, since we've changed direction so many times, really the only thing we have from a business perspective or from a sprint loading perspective is technical stories. So we'll work on some technical debt. We'll actually work on the business stories, keep working on them. But until somebody makes their mind up, we can't really do anything on the business side. That way the team can keep working. The team can keep producing valuable things, and we can eliminate some of that technical debt. So it's really up to the stakeholders and to the product owners to make sure they've got enough things ready to go for those sprints. And again, if you're just new to stories, if you're just starting out, don't worry about the format. Don't worry about getting too detailed. Again, the stories should not be a requirement document. They should not be everything that needs to happen. They should be again, think of the 3 C's for the card. It's the card, or 3 C's for stories. It's the card, conversation, and the confirmation. Of those 3, the conversation is the most important. So the story is just there to say, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to do these things. This is some ideas, and let's talk about it further. So that's where you should be focusing. The bulk of your time is actually making sure you have enough conversation starters out there to put in a sprint. So thanks to Jeff and Ryan for those questions. And now, time for the disclaimer. These words are my own and are not endorsed or representative of any company or organization. You can find me online at @iscoreybryan on Twitter, or infrequently blogging at don'tyellatme.wordpress.com. Our next episode will be on product ownership and agile coaching. We'll be bringing in Maureen Green, a longtime agile coach and one of my friends, to talk about how she deals with those pesky product owners. Thank you very much for helping me deliver episode 21, and I hope you'll come back and join us next time. Talk to you then.